Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we have the brand new Tier 5 Premium Brazilian Battleship Rio de Janeiro import to review for you guys today. As always, massive shout out to the channel's Patreons. They make this review and all ship reviews on this channel possible. If you wish to support the channel, Patreon's the best place to do that, besides of course just watching the videos and streams. I'm not a CC, nor affiliated with Wargaming in any way, shape, or form, so I do not get these premium ships to review in advance. So again, massive shout out to the Patreons for making this possible. Now the Rio de Janeiro, this is it's the Agincourt, but rather than be a straight copy-paste, she has a couple of tweaks done to her. And this is what the Agincourt was initially supposed to be, a dreadnought ordered for the Brazilian Navy, but she was then pressed into service for the Royal Navy due to the outbreak of the First World War. Alright, so as always, ship looks absolutely beautiful. You got this nice crest in the front here that has a surprising amount of detail on it. A lot of times when you look at small either crest or little icons or whatever in this game, they get very pixelated very quickly, but this looks actually pretty nice. On top of that as well, the whole ship, excellent job from the modeling guys and from the art department as usual. Again, this ship's got a lot of guns on it, 7 turrets, 14 guns, a whole host of secondaries. But the ship isn't about secondaries, this is more of a main battery focused Agincourt. So you can get the ship right now for either 53,000 coal or 5,000 doubloons. She's available in the armory at the moment. If you're feeling extra, extra liberal with your spending, you can buy the Admiral package for 10,000 doubloons, which gives you the Rio de Janeiro 10-point commander. You get this White Swan camo for the Rio de Janeiro, but if you want just a ship, 5,300 doubloons or 53,000 coal, and she comes with wrong tab. She comes with the default camo for the Rio de Janeiro, and also the, of course, standard Tier 5 premium economic bonus. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Rio de Janeiro today. Haven't played it at all, just got her out of the armory. And we are going to look at her quirks and features, take her into battle, and then give her a score at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and take a look at her armor, shall we? 19mm bow, 102mm icebreaker bow, which goes to 152mm of plating, which the upper armor belt's also that. 229mm of main belt. Her stern armor 152 down to 102mm plating, and upper is 19. So again, just like the Agincourt, very well protected ship, with the exception of course the 19mm sections. Alright, Citadel is just at the waterline, and if you put the belt armor back on, it is turtleback, so you do get that 229mm bit coming down to cover the Citadel. Very nice. Again, Tier 5 battleships are, of course, still mostly dreadnoughts, so no surprises there. Survivability, she has 48,400 hit points and 14% torpedo damage reduction. For her artillery, she gets 7x2 of the 305mm guns, so again, 14 guns on this ship, with a 31-second reload time, a 60-second 180 time, maximum dispersion 221 meters, and a maximum range of 16.1 kilometers. Her HE does a maximum damage of 5,200, has a 32% chance of causing a fire on the target, and pins 76mm of armor, and come out the tubes at 831 meters a second. Her AP does a maximum damage of 8,100, and they have initial velocity of 831 meters a second coming out of the tubes. Secondary, she does have, of course, a ton of secondaries, but this is not a secondary ship. These have a reload time of 5 seconds, a maximum range of 4.3 kilometers, where if you want to compare that to, let me get the Agincourt up here for comparison. But the Rio de Janeiro is supposed to be more of a main battery ship rather than a rather than a secondary ship like the Agincourt. See, the Agincourt has a 36-second reload time. The secondaries have a maximum range without the commander one of 6.9 kilometers. The guns also don't go out as far as Rio de Janeiro. She gets out to 16 kilometers, unlike the Agincourt. But if you are wondering, again, 5-second reload time, maximum range of 4.3 kilometers. You get 1,100 maximum damage out of the 76mm guns, and they only pin 13 millimeters of armor. They have an initial velocity of 823 meters a second. 152s reload in 10 seconds. Again, a maximum range of 4.3 kilometers, 2,200 maximum damage, 12% chance of causing a fire on the target, and armor penetration capacity of 25 millimeters, and those come with the tubes at 914 meters a second. You may notice the ship does not have any AA, just like the Agincourt doesn't have any AA. So, yeah, at Tier 5 with double CV games, yeah. Granted, a lot of Tier 5 battleships, they don't really have enough AA to matter anyway, unless you're playing like some of the American tech lines with the second hull upgrade. But, yeah. Maneuverability, her maximum speed is 22 knots. And her turning circle radius is 670 meters, and her rotor shift time is 13.4 seconds. Concealment base is 14.3, and yeah, I mean, it's a Tier 5, it's going to be spotted from the moon, so no real surprises there. For her consumable, she gets 4 charges of a heal. It regens 242 hit points per second, it's active for 28 seconds, and reloads in 80 seconds. Her damage con is active for 20 seconds, and reloads in 80 seconds. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and throw the commander module build on the Agincourt, and I'll meet you guys right back here. Alright, so for the module build, it's a Tier 5, so it's not too many options to choose from. We went with main armaments mod 1 to keep these turrets in the fight, and then we went with damage con mod 1 because fires suck, and these give us a negative 5% chance of catching on fire, and 3% to flooding, so excellent. And then aiming systems mod 1 to rein in that dispersion from these 14 guns by 7%. For the commander skills, we went with preventive maintenance to reduce the chance of our modules becoming incapacitated by 30%. For grease the gears, which gives the turrets a 20% boost to their traverse speed. Adrenaline rush because, well, if you take damage, it's nice to get something out of it, and per every 1% of HP that you lose, you get a 0.2% boost to your main battery reload time. That's nice with 14 guns. Basis of survivability to get our modules back in the fight faster and to reduce the flooding and fire times. And then emergency repair expert to get an additional charge of our heal. Then concealment to give the ship a 10% boost to its detectability, 10% boost to its concealment, and then fire prevention to reduce the chance of catching on fire by 10%. Then reduce the maximum number of fires from 4 to 3. Alright, so that's the build for the Rio de Janeiro. I'm going to go ahead and take her out into battle now. I'll meet you guys there with a voiceover review of the ship. Alright, voiceover Mountbatten here, and I'm sorry for not mentioning this in the port segment, but I am a little under the weather. It's that time of the year. I've got, I don't know, the bug that's going around, so I'm sorry if I sound all clogged up or a little bit different. I'm planning on finishing this review, editing it, uploading it, and then drinking half a bottle of NyQuil, and spending the rest of the day in bed. But anyway, the Rio de Janeiro. So, this ship is, well, it's quite different from the Agincourt, and in some ways it's quite the same, especially with how you play it. Now, the Rio de Janeiro is more main battery focused, whereas the Agincourt is more secondary focused, but in both cases, you're going to be primarily spamming HE in both ships. The Rio de Janeiro is a bit better than that, because better than the Agincourt for that, because her guns are far more accurate, and they have a 31-second reload time on 14 guns. Which is pretty darn good, considering there's a lot of 12-gun ships at Tier 5 and Tier 6 that have to pay for that with like a 35-second reload time. Now, granted, the guns are 305 millimeters, and she does have the short fuse AP, so that could be the cause for her having the permission from the Ouija Lords to have a 31-second reload instead of like a 35 or 36-second reload. Now, generally when I was playing her, shoot, man, I got some of the worst matchmaking I've gotten in a long time playing Tier 5. I'm not sure if it's because it was Labor Day and more people were on, but I was getting up-tiered quite a lot. In fact, most of the games that I had in her were Tier 7 games. I had 4 Tier 7 games, 3 Tier 6 games, and 2 Tier 5 games in this ship during the games I played for this review today. And wow, being double up tiered isn't fun in the first place in a Tier 5 ship, that's no secret. The Rio de Janeiro, however, does have the HE to fall back on, which does help when she gets double up tiered, because, you know, HE, all it needs to do is hit this ship and have a chance of starting the fire. As long as you hit the deck or the superstructure, you're going to have a pretty good chance of starting a fire in this ship. And again, with the 31-second reload and the 32% chance per shell, with 14 shells, you will be setting up quite a few fires in this ship. But when you do get double up tier, the main drawback is the range. So it only has a 16.3 kilometer range, which is fine by Tier 5 standards, not great by Tier 7 standards. But once you do get within range, you'll be burning ships down fairly easily in the Rio de Janeiro when you get double up tiered. Now, when you are at Tier 5, the ship's a lot more comfortable to play. You play like more of a traditional Tier 5 battleship, staying at mid-ish range. You can stay at longer range if you want to at Tier 5, and with the accuracy on the ship, you'll be pretty fine there in regards to that. So in most cases, this is a mid to close range ship from Tier 5 games. You get up tier to Tier 6 or Tier 7. You can play it pretty comfortably at longer ranges for this ship, so 16 kilometers. You'll be able to hit your target just fine. The shells, I find, despite having good velocities, I mean, again, the HE and AP comes out the tubes at 831 meters a second, which is absolutely screaming, especially at Tier 5. But they have this very high arc, which means that in a lot of cases you think, okay, the ship's only 12 kilometers away from me, and my shells come out the tubes at darn near 850 meters a second, so I don't have to lead it by that much. But after a couple of salvos, you realize, oh, dang, these shells are very, very much high orbit shells, so you have to lead it by a little bit more. But again, once you're used to that, that's no big deal after that. So let's go ahead and run through her categories now and talk about how they perform after that general overview of how you play the ship. So in terms of the armor, Tier 5, you're pretty tanky. Again, you have that 102mm icebreaker bow and that 102mm icebreaker stern as well, which again is reinforced by a 152mm plate halfway to the main armor belt. We have that 229mm main armor belt as well, which means that if you stay properly angled, you can easily bounce definitely any battleship's guns you can see at Tier 5 and at Tier 6. At Tier 7, you start running to battleships that are either accurate enough or have large enough, well, they all have large enough guns to pen 19mm of armor, but they're accurate enough to where they can easily hit your upper bow and upper stern armor plates. So that is more of an issue. And then you start running into, again, some of the bigger guns that can easily pin and chunk your armor from, more angles than you can down at Tier 5, when there's still a lot of, 305s and, 14-inch and 15-inch, or the larger calibers at Tier 5. So once you start getting double up tiered, yeah, I mean, just like any Dreadnought style battleship, you're going to get chunked a lot more when you get double up tiered. So I wouldn't say that's anything against the ship there, because again, all Tier 5 ships have to deal with that. Survivability, 48,400 hit points. Again, it's pretty comfortable, especially playing the ship at mid to longer ranges. I found myself, I wasn't burning through repair parties that much, especially in the higher tier games, because again, you're kind of sitting in the back. You can do that with the accuracy on the ship, but when you are in like Tier 5 games, you'll be burning through those a little bit more, because you're playing a little bit closer, play a bit more aggressive. And let me tell you, when you're playing the ship at close range with these guns that don't really miss, you can one-tap destroyers with the HE Alpha that this thing can put out very easily, Tier 5 to 6 destroyers. It's hilarious when it does happen. It's kind of like, the Battleship player's dream that, oh, well, I wish I could blap this destroyer out of existence. Many battleships either don't have the HE Alpha or don't have the accuracy to really do that. The Rio de Janeiro and, like, the Conqueror do when they have HE loaded, and it's quite satisfying when it happens. But yeah, moving on to the guns. Like I said, these guns are surprisingly accurate, especially for a Tier 5 battleship. When you look at some of the salvos that I'm getting out of this ship with the accuracy module, it is crazy that this is a Tier 5 battleship,
and the guns are this accurate with 14 guns. Keep that in mind. With 14 guns, you have guns that are this accurate. I guess they're kind of taking some of that formula from like the higher tier ships with small caliber guns for their tier, like with the Mecklenburg, where you have a large number of small caliber guns for your tier, but they are accurate. But again, 305s at tier 5 aren't exactly tiny. I mean, they're not massive either. You know, it's no New York or Texas with 14-inch guns, but they're still, you know, in the pretty decent caliber size for tier 5. And again, they're accurate. Now, the AP. The AP is the short fuse British BB AP, so it is on paper better at pinning cruisers and such, and not as great at pinning battleships. In practice, it seems that the velocity still is too high for these shells to really arm in most cases. I mean, I was overpinning broadside ships from 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers away. Not going to say, you know, within like 7 kilometers, although again, short fuse AP, you should be able to pin them and citadel them quite nicely, but apparently not. But even again, out to 8 and 10 kilometers, they're still overpinning these cruisers, which that should be pinning and ruining their day. But I guess the velocity is just still too high. You know, high velocity, small shell, you get great penetration. Apparently, even with short fuse AP. And again, in a lot of cases too, these are like tier 6 and tier 7 cruisers that I'm blasting their broadsides with 305mm guns with short fuse AP, which again, on paper, should be absolutely wrecking these cruisers, but it's not. And also against battleships, again, because it's short fuse AP, you don't have the penetration to really, you know, get through their armor and get to their citadel in most cases, unless you're at like point blank range. So sure, it'll chunk battleships for like 12 to 15k quite comfortably at most ranges, and at closer ranges, of course, with 14 guns, it'll absolutely wreck their day if you manage to get their size. But it won't murder them, you know. It won't remove half of their HP like you would expect a 14 gun battleship to do. But of course, too, with short fuse, you can pin the bow and sterns of battleships quite easily too, without overpinning them. So that is quite nice to have here. But in most cases, I found just keeping HE loaded is fine for now. Now, with the reload mechanics changing here pretty soon, I do suspect this ship will benefit from those quite a lot, to where it's much faster to swap out between your HE and AP shells. So when those changes come, I think that'll help out this ship a lot, to where you can utilize that AP a lot more, and maybe take gun feeder to get that reload time down even, well, that switching time down even faster. So I do think that's going to help this ship out quite a lot. And turret angles are surprisingly good. The turret rotation rate is atrocious. Even with grease the gears on it, these things still have a 50-second 180 time. However, if you're bound to a target, and you have to switch from one side of your ship to the other side of the ship, you'll still have 5 of your 7 guns on target thanks to the turret placements. Turrets 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7 are the only 2 that probably won't be able to be on target because they are rear facing. The other 5 turrets are forward facing, or in the case of turret number 6, it's a 360 turret, so she'll still be on target if the target's oriented toward your bow. So that's actually not a huge deal. I thought it was going to be a major one, but then I remember, well, no, it's the Agincourt, and the Agincourt does that too. So that's actually quite surprising. And when you're stern in toward a target, you do have less firepower on a target. You only have 3 turrets that will constantly be on target. The other 4 will have to take the long way around to get back to you. But again, bow in, great turret angles. So that's something to consider when you are playing this ship. AA, she has no AA, although tier 5 AA doesn't really do much unless you like the Texas. So yeah, even with the Texas with a limited 3.5 kilometer range, it's kind of funny because people complain that AA does nothing. So when there's a battleship that doesn't have any AA, they're like, oh, well, it's useless because it doesn't have AA. But you just said AA is useless anyway. But of course, it is frustrating when you are being targeted down by a CV and you can't do anything to it. You know, you can't send some poor sailor on deck with a Lee Enfield to shout at the planes, or give someone a megaphone to shout at the planes with a Rio de Janeiro. So yeah, stick with an AA buddy. I had quite a few CV games as well. Only one where the CV actually focused me down, and yeah, it did suck that I could literally do nothing against him. So have an AA friend with you. Maneuverability, she is blessed by the Ouija gods to be allowed to go 23.1 knots and still be a dreadnought. This is something else I found frustrating with the Rio de Janeiro, which again is a pretty normal tier 5 battleship thing, that in tier 6 and tier 7 games, because of the nature of those games and the ships at those tier, you're being outran a lot. And like I've described a lot of matches before, it's a race to do damage where you have to run down your enemies in a lot of cases. And even though the Rio de Janeiro is still faster than a few dreadnoughts, in your tier 6 and tier 7 games, you ain't running nobody down, and your short range and no spotter plane or anything means that you can't extend your range to get your guns in the fight. So in a lot of cases, it's you go to one side, there's 2 or 3 ships there, your team quickly murders them, and then you gotta sail to the other side of the map. And you're still in a pretty slow battleship. So you can't sail to the other side of the map in time to do anything, so you're stuck with like a 40k game. And it's really frustrating because you're selling there. It's taking you 5 minutes to sell to the other side of the map, and either by the time you get there, the enemy team's dead already, or your team's dead already, and then the enemy just farms you down, or the game ends. So, yeah, again, not really a uniquely Rio de Janeiro thing. It's a pretty common thing with tier 5 battleships, but the range doesn't help in that regards. And I feel if they gave her like a 17.3 kilometer range or 17.2 kilometer range, the ship would be a lot more comfortable to play. But I guess with guns as accurate as hers, you can't do that. Consume at 12.9 kilometers is a tier 5 battleship. Consume's not really a major factor in most ships at this tier, because most battleships at this tier, they're consumed even with the commander skill ones, like maybe 5 kilometers less than their maximum firing range, if that. So yeah, it's pretty standard for a tier 5 battleship, and I don't think it really hurts or helps it out any. For her consumables, again, nothing special. You get a heal and get a damage con. Like I said before, heals are very useful in tier 5 games when you can play more aggressively, but in tier 6 and 7 games, most of the time, you're going to be sitting back at medium to long range anyway. So the heal's a decent heal. You can regenerate a pretty decent chunk of your battleship back with it, but again, it's not like a super heal or anything. Standard, battleship heal there. All right, so the Rio de Janeiro overall, this ship is pretty nice. It's a very nice gunboat battleship. She has some wonderful guns for tier 5, some great accuracy on these guns that will be a big relief if you play a lot of tier 5 battleships. This is like I'll say even like tier 8 battleship accuracy in some cases. Now, you still do get the salvo every now and then where you do get that shotgun dispersion, but you're still throwing 14 shells downrange with a shotgun dispersion roll, so you're still going to hit the target, which is again is why you want to load HE most of the time, and basically be a tier 5 conqueror. And then when you have broadside, load AP, chunk them for like 12 to 15k quite easily. Then when they go angled into you, load up that HE and just burn them down. And surprisingly a good tier 5 battleship to deal with DDs. Again, with 14 guns that are very accurate with British BBHE, you're going to ruin a destroyer's day quite fast with these guns if they try to be like a lot of cheeky tier 5 and tier 6 DDs are and get in close to you. So that's another big up for it here. And it's a free ship. It's 53,000 coal in the armory, which isn't a lot of coal. Most players can easily get that amount of coal just by playing the game and getting the 3 coal containers. If you get the 3 coal containers, it'll take you like 45 days, because you get 1,400 coal every day if you select that. And that's just from getting the containers. If you participate in the combat missions, ranked, or other modes, like the Puerto Rico dockyard, you'll get even more coal even quicker. So for a ship that is a free ship, it's a pretty good boat. And if you do want to buy it outright, it's only 5,000 dubs. Which again, it's a tier 5, so it's fairly cheap, and it's pretty good at what it does. Now, unfortunately, it's not really like a commander train or anything, because there's no Pan-American battleship line yet. You do have the, what was the dockyard ship? The Atlantico, which you can't use as commander for because the Atlantico is a secondary ship. Well, I guess if you want to make a main battery build with Atlantico, sure, you could use the commander there. So I guess it kind of is, but the Atlantico is also a premium ship. So yeah, again, there's no Pan American tech line even in the game yet, so it's not really a good commander trainer. It's a neat historical ship for sure, and a pretty darn decent premium in my mind as well. So I would give the Rio de Janeiro a 7 out of 10. The 14-inch guns, 14-inch guns, I wish they were 14-inch guns. The pros being the 14 guns, the good turret angles and turret positions from a bow facing the target via your bow. The HE is excellent on this ship, British BBHE. The AP is short fuse, so you get good consistent chunks out of broadside battleships. But again, it's still weird with the velocity. I've had a lot of overpins on cruisers with this AP for some reason. I don't know if I was having a bad evening with it or what, but yeah. Along with the excellent reload time of 31 seconds space, with Adrenaline Rush, you're going to get that down mighty fast in the ship. Her armor's pretty decent overall, especially for Tier 5. Again, at Tier 7 matches, your armor's going to be a bit more squishy, but again, that's every Tier 5 battleship. The downsides being that, well, there's no AA on this ship, and you're still within the matchmaking bracket to where you can easily see double CV games, and, well, the range is a little short for my taste. Again, I think the ship should have like a 17-kilometer range, or they could have given it a spotter plan to get that the ship in real life didn't have one, but that hasn't stopped wargaming from beforehand, from doing this before, so yeah, I mean, so either give her a slight buff to her range or some type of way to extend her range. Again, spotter plane, mythical planned up refit for the Agincourt. Again, they've used that excuse plenty of times to change ships around. So that's the only real downsides for me for this ship. She is a little on the slow side, but I wouldn't say it's a major downside. Again, Tier 5 Dreadnought style BBs all have this problem. So overall, again, for a ship that is a free ship, this is a pretty good pickup. And if you like historical ships, this is a good historical ship, because this was what was supposed to happen to the Agincourt before the British took it from the Brazilians, then tried to give it to the Ottomans, but then that didn't happen. But then the Brazilians didn't want to buy it back. This ship's got a weird history. But anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're on the way to 40,000 subs. We're under 2,000 away from that goal, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday. Have a wonderful week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.